Welcome to the Talking Toughness series of podcasts, where we examine the mental toughness concept with guests from a wide range of sectors, illustrating that our mental approach to what happens to us and around us matters for all of us. Our guests come from the worlds of business and public service, education, social mobility, sport, and health. They all share their experiences and their observations about the factors that have enabled them to survive and to thrive on their journey through life. Many guests have gone further and incorporated the concept into what they do as coaches, trainers, managers, and leaders, helping others to thrive in their turn. Their experiences are valuable to those of us who strive to do the same. Good morning, John. How are we this morning?
Very well, Doug. Yeah, very well. Do you know, I've been quite busy doing quite a bit of DIY of late. Few bits around the house.
So,
Walls, floors, touching stuff up. I keep
walls and
myself busy.
floors. That's impressive stuff. I only manage shelves.
Yeah, no, I probably test my own mental toughness if I'm honest, because I'm not. I wouldn't say I'm a gifted handyman, but I know that if I just stick at it and I keep going and I watch enough YouTube, eventually I'll get things done one way or another. So, how are you?
Good. I'm very well. I'm so impressed with you building your confidence in your abilities and spreading those abilities.
It's what I'm trying to do. Each adversity I go through, every time I hammer that thumb, it makes me a little bit tougher for the next time. So who have we got with us today, Doug?
Well, today we've got our very good friend, Leah Zalams. Leah's, as you know, is one of Australia's leading coaching psychologists. And we had the pleasure of spending a week with Leah about 3 years ago, and she looked after us royally well, as they say. Originally, Leah was a biochemist, which is a bit of background she shares with me. The difference being that she actually completed her degree in biochemistry, which I didn't. I eventually switched to economics, much more easier subject. But Leah is still very much a scientist in her approach to many things. I suppose if we were to sum up Leah in one word, we would probably choose the word passion. And she's passionate about two or three things. Firstly, women's development, particularly encouraging females to pick up and enter STEM careers, where they're still very much underrepresented. And the other area is enterprise and entrepreneurship. And very often she combines both, encouraging women to step into enterprise and entrepreneurship. But I suppose a third passion, I'd like to think it's a third passion, is mental toughness, which Leah seems to blend into her other passions and does that extremely well. And of course, Leah is a member of our Mental Toughness Advisory Board, which helps to steer global research on mental toughness. So we're really, really pleased to have Leah today with us to explore all of these issues. Welcome, Leah.
Oh, thank you, Doug, and hello to you, and hello, John, over there in the UK, and of course I'm here in Sydney. And what a wonderful introduction. Thank you for those kind words. And I think I would add, I was wondering whether the third passion was going to be mental toughness or marathon running.
Of course, sorry. Yes, I should have mentioned that.
Definitely, whenever things get tough, when I'm on those big runs, I actually have Peter Klopp's words in my ears that that it doesn't. Marathon runners don't need mental toughness because they run because they love it. And so I have to remind myself I don't need mental toughness to finish this because I'm a marathon runner and I love it.
That's it.
But it's and I think it's and you mentioned the word passion as well, and I think that is what is the differentiator. If I wasn't passionate about running, it would be hard for me, but because I'm intrinsically motivated by it, it doesn't take me mental toughness to finish the run, even when I'm really, really tired, because I made a decision 6 months ago that I was going to run this. So I'm going to finish because I made that decision 6 months ago. So it's never a thought that I'm going to quit. Do you know what I'm saying? And so in that sense, it doesn't require extra effort for me mentally to finish. It's just my body to keep pushing along.
It's great that you kind of open with that, Leah, because of course for people might be interested to know Peter Clough's original PhD many moons ago was interested in mental toughness, thinking, who's mentally tough? Surely marathon runners, that looks tough. And then actually, contrary to what he expected at the start, found that marathon runners are no tougher than anybody else. What they're good at is running. And doing things you're really good at kind of doesn't require as much digging deep and being tough. Like whenever I first heard about that, I thought, yeah, that the guys running the London Marathon in 2.5 hours, 3 hours, are they the toughest ones, or is it the person who's dressed as a phone box doing it in 6.5 hours?
Exactly, and I'm in that latter category, John. And in fact, it's on this 30K run.
Dressed as a phone box.
No, actually, I'm going to come up with a more interesting outfit rather than my black runners. But the guys that finish up front will be doing it in 2 hours 45, right? So, And you're right. It's like the ones at the back are doing it tough, but we come at it with the same passion. You couldn't run that long and in those kind of conditions if there wasn't some sort of intrinsic motivation. And I think that's the important thing, that, when you're good at something, like I know when I'm good at something, I'm naturally passionate about it and I like it because I like feeling that way.
Yeah,
and I guess that's why we so much of certainly the coaching work I do, whether it's with earlier. I've stopped using the words young and old, so it's early career people and more experienced people. That it's so important that we connect with what is important to us and what's important to us and what we like. And so it puts another spin on the advice I can remember from school counselors and my parents. It's like, you could be good at whatever you do, so just find something you like. And it sort of sounds very simplistic, but when we apply that and look through the lens of the mental toughness model as well, so much of those 4 elements of the mental toughness model do bring us to that point of we really are operating at our highest performance level and our highest well-being level when we bring all those 4 things together, doing something that really inspires us.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, the idea, they kind of come together where our performance and well-being are kind of synergistic. Not like there's sometimes this weird thing that I come across in sport where people feel that, well, are you interested in sort of performance and winning, or kind of participation and well-being and being happy? And I always think, I don't know about you, but I really love winning. Like I think the two are positively related.
Exactly, but if you think like well-being has become the vernacular of corporate HR, and it's like leadership and well-being. So post-COVID, well-being has really risen in the ranks of what companies are wanting to. The culture that they want to create in their organizations, because people are leaving in droves. They're looking at other ways of how to live and love, as it were, to do both, to win and to actually enjoy and be the best version of yourself. Because I don't think traditional corporate life was allowing that, right, pre-COVID. And yet with the mental toughness model, you guys have been talking high performance and well-being for decades already. So, you've really only, I think, are coming of age now where the world of management and leadership is really starting to look and not just give lip service to well-being, but we have to incorporate that for our people and our leaders, integrated and not either or, as you say.
100%. It's not like well-being is taking time away from performance. You need a break to look after your well-being, so you stop performing. It's kind of any sort of deep thought on it will pretty quickly take you to the point of thinking, well, that's nonsense. Yet it's so easy to fall into that culture where well-being is seen as taking a break from doing things well.
But even back in 2015, 2016, when I did my coaching psychology masters at Sydney Uni, and that's where I learnt about the mental toughness model in our peak performance subject. And so back then, we were like learning a lot about leadership and well-being. And I can remember saying at the time to my lecturers, who's going to pay me out there in corporate land to teach well-being? Like, who's going to pay me to do that? And yet now, and I think that's one of the COVID has really accelerated that whole consciousness, I think, around it's a must. And it's no longer like something that's just on the values on the wall, but companies are having to invest in real programs that do equip their people to perform at their best and be their best versions of themselves as well. It's not an either or. It's not like you go to your life coach for well-being training and you go to your corporate executive coach for leadership. We really do integrate both worlds now, and I really do see that the mental toughness psychology concept, that those constructs really give us such a strong evidence-based body of work to draw on that then can help us bring that to both the corporate world and entrepreneurship and people at all stages of their career and life.
Absolutely, Leah. I have to say, in the last, 12 months, we have probably picked up more contracts to do with well-being than we have with performance. And yet, when we examine it closely, they're talking about the same thing. They're talking about both. They are interested in achieving things without necessarily crucifying their employees or their staff in the process. I think there's a third thing that's coming through, though, and that's this notion of agility, because that's to do with the pace of change. Do you find, are you coming across that interest as well?
Absolutely. Agility and a flexibility, the directive, the leader that people want to follow. But we've also got to be able to embrace the people who are not as wired up for high performance. And so this is where being able to meet people where they are, leaders are needing to do that, and we can know that intellectually, but to actually do that, at a one-on-one level or a team level, it's not a natural skill for a lot of leaders.
Yeah.
And so so that flexibility, and this comes back to our well-being. And I find more and more that the foundation of the coaching work I do with leaders and earlier career people as well is their health and their well-being. They need those rituals in place. They need that self-care before. It really is putting the oxygen mask on and keeping it on while you serve or while you deliver or while you facilitate other people's growth and development as well. And I think that's the area of growth that is really front and center at the moment. How do you develop that flexibility within your own, the way you lead yourself, but also in dealing with with the stresses and pressures of teams? And everybody wants diversity and inclusion, but we all know as soon as you've got diversity, you've got a whole different dynamic to deal with in communication wise, don't you? It's very easy when you're all the same around that table. Very different when you actually have people with different opinions and perspectives and worldviews who are actually given the space to voice it. What do you do with all that suddenly? So I think our work is only beginning.
Oh, absolutely. And I think COVID has probably been, when we look back in 10, 15 years, we might see COVID as a positive experience. It shook things up. It moved us out of complacency. I mean, the thing I learned in economics was when people talk about recessions, if you look back at recessions, they were unpleasant for some people, but actually there were the moments of what Schumpeter called creative destruction. That's when things moved on. And I think we might find people begin to understand what it is that people need in our faster and faster moving society.
And definitely the 20-somethings have a very different mindset to how they're approaching work and what they want out of life and what they're prepared to do and not do than what it was 30 years ago or even earlier. That with having a voice and using your voice creates a different dynamic as well. And I think you're absolutely right, Doug, that COVID really has pressurized the system on a global level that is now, I think there's a lot of potential creativity bubbling. And it's a case of how do we harness that, into positive innovation. There are so many big, major problems that need creative solutions.
That's brilliant, Leah. Perhaps we can just focus for a moment on one of your passions and think about creative solutions to the challenges for women. If I look back on my lifetime, I do see big positive changes, but still see there's a long way to go. In the UK, you're very well known for your stance on women's development. You've got a very high profile here. So can you tell us a little bit about that and how you see mental toughness playing a part in that?
Thank you, Doug. We've got our individual development, that things we can control and things we can't control. So there's the individual and then there's the system. And throughout my own career, and I guess my style has always been to take responsibility for the outcomes I want to produce, so deciding what they are, and then planning and going and making those things happen. And I've worked in male-dominated systems and environments throughout my career. After I did my biochemistry degree, I realised that the laboratory was way too lonely and too smelly for me. That I belonged in the world of people and business, and what makes people tick, and how do we create businesses that make a positive difference. And so and I worked in healthcare, solution sales, and in radiology and IT, and it's largely male dominated from a leadership and specialist perspective. But for me, that never worried me because we were all on a mission together. And I conducted a number of interviews with women in STEM a couple of years ago at different stages of their leadership, and particularly women who had taken a technology a degree and direction in their career. And I have to say that their overarching mindset was similar, that they were pursuing their vision, their goals, what they wanted to achieve, the difference they wanted to make. And so, yes, there was a lot of challenges and a lot of barriers and a lot of ceilings, and there's a lot of things we've got to fix systemically. But first of all, we've got to develop our own voice and the message we want to take to the world that reflects what's important to us as individuals, and to speak that into reality. And I think what's happening now, particularly with the internet, particularly with, you know, the global state of leadership being in chaos, let's face it, I think that's opened up opportunity for more women to step in. And so we're getting a more of a groundswell of more women and women coming together, and we've got to keep speaking up until we're heard, right? That's on an individual level. And that's largely my role as that coach and the supporter and the challenger, right? Is when I'm working with women. I love that because it doesn't take much to get them fired up again when they've got someone, you know, in their corner. And I think that's been the missing piece, that a lot of the women trailblazers in the past really did do it on their own. They didn't have someone in their corner. But now globally we see there's almost a shift to the point where, what about the young men? Who's mentoring them and who's batting for them in their corner? But I think bringing it back to women and what we need and what we see happening, and it is about creating that, bringing that best self to the world and expressing that in different ways so different people can understand us, right? So much of it comes back to communication. And I see that when I'm working, my mental toughness profile, for example, is quite sort of, you know, around that 7 and 8 in most of the categories. So, and yet when I'm working with women in particular who have higher levels of mental sensitivity, it's like this is where the mental toughness profile, it helps me just to pause, take breath, and allow space for them to express themselves in their way and not be wrong for doing it their way, because it's different to my way. And so this is where that's helping me to build my flexibility in being able to meet them where they are. And I think this is where women traditionally are often do have higher levels of this emotional intelligence and being able to sense and feel and follow that gut feeling. And the business world hasn't always valued that. So I think with more and more women coming into the business world and holding those leadership and management roles, that culture is changing, but it's all going to take time. But again, it is about embracing differences and embracing characteristics of all people in the team, you know, and I think, again, this is where leaders traditionally, as we know, the research shows that people who do have higher levels of mental toughness often are more successful in business and leadership in life. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the people who identify more on that mental sensitivity and are not going to be great leaders. On the contrary. But I think this is where I find that people need more time and space for that expressiveness to be expressed and acknowledged and worked with. And I think this is where women really bring that into the room and much more readily than traditionally how men have. And so I think, as we can learn to harness that and value that, and I guess that brings that element of vulnerability to the table, which is rarely comfortable for anyone, whether you're male or female, because we've got to feel safe psychologically. It's not going to come back to bite us. And so I think as we get better at practicing that, taking risks, as it were, and supporting each other, I think the business world is going to be a much more enjoyable place to spend a lot of our time.
Yeah, and I just wonder there, Leah, when you spoke about interviewing women that had been successful in STEM careers, because of course, like the ones that are successful in STEM careers are as the exception, really, because obviously we know the small amount, still relatively even in 2022, that go into that STEM realm. What is it about women that have pursued and succeeded in those male dominant sectors that's enabled them to do it? Do women almost have to be more mentally tough to be able to manage in there, which means you kind of get this lost potential, I suppose?
Yes, the lost potential of the women who are more mentally sensitive, and therefore their passion and their vision doesn't get a chance to be explored and developed, as opposed to the women that identify or are more naturally mentally tough. That did seem to be something that they saw in themselves as well, that they were able to stay focused on. It really does speak to the mental toughness model, that they were able to stay on task in terms of what they wanted to produce, what they wanted to improve, the difference they wanted to make. That was overpowering the obstacles. And it was interesting that particularly the women in engineering were also saying that in engineering that they didn't feel any sense of struggle in engineering with hierarchies and male dominance, because male engineers are actually really lovely people. So, it really depended on different environments. But I think, definitely the feeling was that we've got to create systems where the women who are more mentally sensitive are able to flourish as well. That you're not just one of these go-getter types. That I was born as a go-getter, and I feel so grateful for that. I feel so grateful I didn't have to learn how to be a go-getter.
Can I ask as well, Leah, on the go-getter end, you can see how sort of cultural stereotypes and stuff like that might lead to more sensitive women not following careers in male-dominated sectors. But are there sometimes those stereotypes attached to tough women? Like just for an example, I've never been called bossy in my life. I'm a man. I don't know any man that's ever been called bossy. Do you have those kind of sometimes stereotypes if you're a go-getter?
Yes, and if you are following up, then you become a nagger, right?
A nagger. I've never been a nagger. I've never been bossy.
You've never been a nagger. You've never been bossy. What's the other one? Assertive, right? Men are assertive and women are aggressive, right? And we see that, time and time again. And I think there's an element of like, what do we listen to, John, as well? Like, do we listen to that, or do we just, get on with it and produce better outcomes? And I think, and that's what I do see, is almost an overcompensatory behavior as well, to prove them wrong and to overwork and overdo. And some, in fact, one of the values, I was speaking to a sales leader in a major company, and she said one of the values the leadership team agreed upon was that if you have to shout in the meeting to get your point heard, you are allowed to shout if that's what it takes, right? So I think there's an element of, like, again, let's look at how do we disrupt what the norms in order to create something new and better. And yeah, but you're right. I mean, there are all those biases, all the ceiling, they're all real. They're all there. We've been around for, a few centuries, and so we are doing things differently. And that's why, like, models like the mental toughness model, and which ties in beautifully with, the self-determination theory around autonomy and relatedness, and believing that you can, right? It's like, Doug, you often say, we either believe we can or we believe we can't. And either way, we're true. I think it was Ford who originally said that. So what happens in here, and this is the realm of what is so important, that we keep improving the way we do leadership development, the way we coach, the way we use models like the mental toughness model to facilitate and operationalize better performance and better experience of ourselves, so that we can and do enjoy our work and our lives as we work. I think that's really the holy grail of what we're striving for. And so, there's nothing wrong with women deciding to have children and not work and not make money. That's equally as noble as somebody who wants to be the next prime minister or president, right? I think there's an element of let's stop judging. Let's just pause on the judgment and celebrate potential and focus on bringing that potential to life. And I think that's where, women like myself who, are born with this go-getter attitude, I feel it's almost my duty to help others from where they are get to a place where they can be making choices that's going to make their heart sing, and also do more than just pay the mortgage and get food on the table. You want to be able to enjoy travel again. And now that things are opening up, and to do fun things in life. So I think the other thing, apart from a lot of these women being very focused they were focused on finding their thing they wanted to do in life, And a lot of it was about following something that inspired them and intrigued them. They all wanted to make a positive difference, which led them into those technology careers, which, because technology is the heart of innovation. And we absolutely need more women, more of everybody, to come in now that we're moving, more and more into machine learning and AI. It's absolutely paramount that we get diversity and inclusion into what comes next.
And just for the benefit of anyone who's listening, thinking, so are there any differences in between males and females in mental toughness scores? I thought I'll just pull up a data set in front of me before we chat to Leah. I have a data set here of 79,000 people, which is almost a 50-50 split between males and females. And throughout the whole model of mental toughness, there's no meaningful difference in any of it. It's all, any difference would be like less than a third of one step, like nothing. Which kind of just does underline that point about its potential again.
Yes, and also the fact that the mental toughness model is dealing with measuring our attitudes. We're not talking behaviours, right? I think we're talking attitudes. And I mean, how many, evidence-based models are there that you can actually measure changes in attitude? I find it, just fascinating that we're able to do that. And as much for me, in how it helps me to work with a broad range of people with different profiles as well, because it's very easy, as I was saying, to work with people who are just like you. But it's very, very and that's the challenge of, why I love what I do so much, is that every individual has their unique footprint, as it were, and how those elements then are expressed and how they make meaning of what happens in workplaces. And, with most of the coaching work I do, most of the challenge comes down to communication issues, right? With the boss, within the team, what's expected of them, their own self-talk around this, self-doubt and not being good enough. And we all have that record playing, as we were speaking before. And it's just, it's fascinating to see how different and yet how similar we are at our core. When you strip away all of the stuff on the outside.
I think that's a really good point, Leah, because we've noticed it in our work quite a lot that, we pick up this. I mean, we know the evidence is that males and females are broadly the same. So from an internal perspective, there's no reason why a woman can't do what a man can do. But it's the external environment. And quite often that is shaped historically by males. And I think that's the key to it. To cut a very long story short, we worked with an organisation that had a growing female membership of its senior leadership team, but they were still feeling that they were being ignored by the males. So we used the mental toughness questionnaire, and sure enough, we found differences in profiles between the males and females. And we explored that with both groups. And genuinely, the males didn't understand that they were discriminating against the females in the management team. And they were horrified. It isn't as if there's a male conspiracy, or maybe there are in some places, but there wasn't in this organisation. They'd behaved the way they'd behaved since they were born and didn't understand that it was inhibiting other people. And so this notion of creating self-awareness is really important in breaking those barriers down.
And I think that point that you make there too, that the awareness that you get from the profile itself can be all that's required to flick a switch for change. It doesn't necessarily, require 6 months or 12 months of a specific intervention, right? I mean, a lot of we've got to be aware before we can change.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're seeing in survey after survey after survey. A lot of the women, particularly in that level before the C level, there's report after report that shows women believe that the male sitting in the cubicle next to them might be at the same level as that they're going to get a better shot at the top job than they are, simply because that's what we think. And so we need to change how we think, and then I'm sure there will be a meeting in the middle at some point, where all the work that we're doing and the awareness and the speaking out and the change that we're all trying to make, I'm sure that we are moving in the right direction. It's just probably not as quick as we'd like it to be. And there's no one size fits all either. But I think it's very encouraging to know that when it comes to our mindset, that there is no psychological one-upmanship or that men are more mentally tough than women.
No, and I think, Leah, you're making your big contribution to creating that meeting in the middle and creating progress. I think we've probably come to a good break point, and I really appreciate your contribution. I would say John would probably agree with me. You're probably one of the easiest people to have a conversation with.
Yeah, I did think at one point there, Leah, you said that it's easy to work on. It's easy to work with people that are like ourselves, and I thought,
yeah,
I'd imagine you'd find it quite hard to find people that are like yourself, to be honest.
I take that as a compliment, John, but there are a few of us around, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, Leah, I think there's some great takeaways in this conversation. One's for me, we started with talking about the importance of intrinsic motivation and passion. You used the phrase, find something you like, and that reminds me of that Confucian statement. Or is it, find a job you love and you'll never work a day in your life? That's
right.
The same sort of philosophy. And then the connection between performance and well-being being two sides of the same coin. I think that's really, really important. And then you talked about understanding obstacles and helping everybody, the mentally sensitive and the mentally tough, to deal with those obstacles. Because we do forget that the mentally tough very often are in as much need of support as the mentally sensitive. So there are three great takeaways there. And for me, it's a question for another time, but when you start talking about running 30 kilometers through a national park to enjoy the scenery, I'm thinking, is there an easier way to enjoy the scenery, Leah?
Well, it's funny. I guess you could walk it, but why walk it when you can run it? Walking's way too slow, So I guess each to their own.
Absolutely.
And, keeps me on my toes.
Brilliant, Leah. So we know how to get hold of you, but people who are listening to this, and I'm sure it will happen, will be very interested in connecting with you. So what's the best way to connect with you?
Oh, definitely. I think that the easiest place to connect with me is on LinkedIn. So just look me up, Leah Zallums, Liazalums. There's only one of me. And connect and let me know that you've listened to the podcast, and I'd be happy to speak to any listeners who want to explore the mental toughness profile assessment any further, or or how we can accelerate this meeting in the middle that we're all striving for in the world.
I think that's a great slogan for you, Leah. There's only one of me.
Oh, this has been so much fun. It's been great to connect with you both today. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast.